Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. So today I'll be giving an introduction to Buddhism. So starting with a very short guided meditation, and then after that I'll give an overview of the basic principles of Buddhist practice. And then if there's any questions, I'll take any questions at the end of the talk. So you're welcome to type in questions at any time, and I'll answer them at the end. So first off, start by getting in a comfortable, upright sitting position. And the upright is much more important than the comfortable. So it's better to be in an uncomfortable upright position than in a comfortable slouch. So make sure you're sitting up nice and straight with your shoulders back and relaxed. Your hands resting gently together in your lap. You can close your eyes unless you're feeling sleepy. If you're feeling sleepy, it's better to keep your eyes about halfway open. Bring a slight smile to your lips. And take a few long, slow, deep breaths. Relaxing your body and mind with each breath. So for the next few minutes, you don't need to remember anything or plan anything. So you can forget all about whatever you've been thinking of all day. You can just forget about all of that. You can forget about your plans. They don't matter for the next few minutes. Just bring all your attention to the present moment. Focusing on clearly feeling your own body. So right at the center of your experience is this physical body. So bring all your attention to clearly, intensely feeling your own body. So keeping that relaxed mind and gentle smile. Focus on feeling your body with intensity, clarity, and enjoyment. So enjoying the experience of your body. Enjoying how it feels to be right here, right now, with nothing to worry about. It's a clear and steady attention. And as you focus on your body, thoughts and emotions will drift through the mind. Just pay no attention to them, not reacting to them with either desire or aversion. Just take no interest in those thoughts. Stay focused on your body. Let the thoughts come and go without reacting. Like the sound of voices in the distance, we take no interest. In the same way, take no interest in the thoughts that drift through the mind. Just stay focused on your body. And as you become more clearly aware of your body, you can center attention at your hands, where they rest in your lap. Still maintaining awareness of the whole body, but giving a smaller, clearly defined center point for the mind. It's where your hands touch in your lap. If you notice your mind is drifting off, just bring it right back to your body. Just immediately let go of whatever you were involved in, as if it was completely unimportant. And bring attention back to your body, as though your body is the most interesting, exciting, important thing in the entire world. Paying close attention to your body as though something completely unexpected might happen at any moment. So you can take a deep breath, let it out slowly. Let's take a moment to appreciate the peacefulness of the mind. Even after just a few minutes of meditation, you can notice a difference. So, as mentioned, I'll be giving a introduction level talk on Buddhism. So an introductory explanation of Buddhism and Buddhist practice. So we can begin with a short traditional verse of homage to the Buddha. So this is a ancient chant that has been used since the time of the Buddha. So since the Buddha was still alive, this chant has been used, and it's been preserved for almost 2,600 years now. So we'll start with the traditional verse of homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. So in talking about Buddhism, so I'd like to actually start by looking at the word Buddhism. So the word Buddhism is the ism of Buddha, so the practice of being like the Buddha, the practice of emulating the Buddha, the practice of becoming a Buddha. So ultimately, Buddhism is not necessarily about worshipping the Buddha, though that might be some element of what one does. But ultimately, it's about becoming the Buddha. It's about becoming exactly the same as the Buddha. So to even talk about Buddhism, it's necessary to first talk about what a Buddha is and why a Buddha is special. So first off, a Buddha it's a category of being. And it's a category of being that anyone can become through their own effort. So Buddha is not a singular individual, but rather it's a kind of person that anyone can become through their own practice, through their own effort. Usually when we talk about the Buddha, we're talking about a particular person who was born with the name Siddhartha Gautama and lived in ancient India, again, about 2,600 years ago. And through practicing a path of spiritual self-development, he eventually attained complete perfection of mind, eventually attained infinite wisdom and compassion. So a clear, direct understanding of the nature of reality, a clear, direct understanding of the nature of the human mind, and by extension, all minds. And most importantly, a clear and direct understanding of what happiness is, what suffering is, and how we can train ourselves to have unconditional happiness all the time without fail. How to train ourselves so that we never experience sadness or misery or anguish or confusion or despair, so that we never experience any kind of suffering or even the slightest discomfort at all. And this is all done through training the mind. So the Buddha didn't have someone who could teach him these things, because at the time there was no Buddhism. There was nobody teaching the path to awakening. So the Buddha had to figure these things out on his own. And then once he figured them out, then he taught it to other people. And other people followed the Buddha's instructions and attained the same deep realization, the deep purity of mind that the Buddha had realized. So attaining awakening, following the Buddha's instructions. So awakening to the true nature of reality. And then they taught more people and memorized the Buddha's teachings and preserved them in the form of the Buddhist scriptures, which has created a lineage which extends all the way to the modern day. So in the modern day, there's hundreds of millions of Buddhists all around the world, all of whom have inherited some tradition of the Buddha's teachings, so coming from ancient India. And the teachings of a Buddha, they're always the same. So whenever somebody attains full awakening and starts teaching the path of awakening, they always teach basically the same things, the same basic principles. And those principles are what we call the Dhamma. So the Dhamma are the basic principles of reality, which are realized by a Buddha, by a fully awakened being, and taught to others so that they can follow the instructions and become awakened as well. And the practices that the Buddha taught, broadly speaking, can be divided into three major trainings. So the Buddha divided his teachings in several different ways, but one of the most commonly used frameworks is the three trainings. The first training is morality, which in the scriptural language is called sila. The second training is concentration, which is called Samadhi in the original language. And the third training is wisdom, which is called Panya in scriptural language. So sila, or morality, this is what we do with our body and our speech. So it's primarily how we act and behave in the world. So it's recognizing that if we want to develop a clear and direct understanding of the mind, well, the main way that we relate to our mind is actually through our body. The main way that we develop and train our mind is actually through what we do with our body. And it's also recognizing that what we do with our body determines the conditions that we have for training our mind. So we want to make actions which will produce results that are of benefit to training the mind. And this also points back to a very important principle of the Buddha's teachings, which is the principle of moral causality. The principle that every single choice we make will eventually come back to us with some corresponding result. So this is what we call karma. The idea that every action that we make will eventually create a corresponding result. In other words, if you hurt someone, then in the future you will be harmed. If you steal, then in the future you will be poor. And the opposite is also true. If you're generous, then in the future you'll be wealthy. If you're kind, then in the future, actually the Buddha says the results of kindness are beauty. And actually you can see this to some degree just in this life even. So when people are cruel, when they're mean, when they're unkind to others, then that also makes them unattractive, unappealing. But when somebody is very kind and friendly, generous and courteous to others, then they have a radiance and attractiveness to them. But the Buddha is pointing to something much deeper, a deeper principle, that the actions and choices that we make directly shape how we experience the world. So we want to make choices which will shape our world in a supportive way, in a way which brings benefit to ourselves as well as others. So that's one of the basic reasons for practicing sila, or morality. And another important reason for practicing sila is that it's a way of coming to understand our own mind. So for example, if you take on a practice of not killing, which is one of the major practices of Buddhism. So you take on a practice of not killing. Well, what happens when you're tempted to kill something? Maybe a mosquito lands on your arm and starts to bite. And before getting into Buddhism, you might just kill the mosquito without even thinking about it. But now, instead, you notice the mosquito starting to bite you. And you notice the urge to kill the mosquito. And you remember that you've made a determination to not kill anything. And then you stop yourself. So what this means is that you'll start to develop a much sharper, clearer self-awareness, a much sharper, clearer awareness of your own mind. And you'll also start to learn how to control your impulses. And this is very important because most of our impulses are ultimately self-destructive. Our impulses, following our impulses, is what's produced so much confusion and anxiety and misery for us in the past. So learning how to be clearly aware of our own mind and to restrain our impulses is a way of starting to learn some of the basics of how to be happy in this world, of how to live a happy life. When we talk about morality, it's also important to remember the basic foundational principles of morality in Buddhism, which is quite simply, don't hurt anyone. Don't hurt anyone and try to help everyone. Very simple principles. Don't hurt anyone, and that includes yourself. So yourself or any other living being, don't hurt anyone. And try to be of benefit. Try to help the people in your life to the extent that you're able to. So these are the basic principles of morality, of kindness. Then we have some specific examples, like not killing, not stealing, not telling lies, not cheating on your partner, not using intoxicants. So what we call the 5 precepts, which are some of the more blatantly obvious examples of not harming. And as one becomes more refined in one's commitment to non-harming, then one starts to realize that there's much more detailed and precise ways of understanding this, that you can apply this basic principle of don't hurt anyone, try to help everyone. You can apply that to any situation. So you don't need a set of rules to follow. You just need these two rules. That's all you need. It's also important to point out that the word sila, which I mentioned earlier, is normally translated as morality. Another translation of this word is habit. So sila also has the meaning of habit. In other words, the behaviors that we choose to engage in become our habits. And our habits become very strong impulses, which seem almost impossible to restrain or go against. So through taking on a commitment to following training rules of kindness and harmlessness, then we're building new habits. We're building wholesome habits of mind. And we're weakening and breaking our harmful habits, our old bad habits of mind, our old bad habits of behavior. The second major training of Buddhism is Samadhi, or concentration. So this is something which we develop mainly through meditation practice. So in the meditation period we did just now, we were practicing focusing the mind on being clearly aware of one's body, of one's physical sensations. So this is a way of gathering together the mind, collecting together the mind, which is literally what the word samadhi means. The word samadhi means gathering together or holding together. So we're gathering together the mind by focusing on our body, so that the mind is not constantly running all over the place. It's not constantly bouncing around, constantly distracted and scattered. Because when the mind is constantly scattered and bouncing all around, then it's very uncomfortable. It's a very unpleasant place to be. And often the way we try to remedy that is through further distraction. When our mind is a mess and all over the place, then we listen to some music, or we watch a movie, or we call our friends, or we find some way to waste time and distract ourselves. But once again, that just makes the problem worse. That just builds up even more agitation and distraction and movement in the mind. Rather than bringing benefit, it actually makes things worse. So instead, through meditation practice, we're learning how to stabilize and steady the mind, how to collect the mind together into a still, peaceful awareness, which doesn't need anything, which doesn't crave anything. And this leads us to the third major training, which is the training in wisdom. So the training in wisdom has 3 main layers. So the first layer is learning that wisdom that comes through hearing information, through learning information. So for example, reading books or listening to Dhamma talks, then you start to accumulate some information about the Buddha's teachings. And by reflecting on that, you'll start to get some level of wisdom. The second major level of wisdom is when you deeply think about and reflect on and contemplate what you've learned. And through that, you come to a deeper understanding of it. And the third layer of wisdom is the wisdom that comes through experiencing, through developing the practices that the Buddha taught. Then you come to a direct experience of those teachings. So this is when wisdom becomes the deepest and most profound. But this all starts with a basic understanding. And in talking about wisdom, it's important to start with talking about the Four Noble Truths. So this is considered to be the foundational doctrine of Buddhism, is the Four Noble Truths, the most important central characteristic of what the Buddha taught. So the first truth is that life is unsatisfying. Everything we experience in life is ultimately unsatisfying. Life is filled with unpleasant, uncomfortable experiences. There's also pleasant things that happen. There's also enjoyable things in life. But even the enjoyable things are temporary and unreliable. So if we try to rely upon temporary and unreliable experiences for our happiness, then our happiness will not be stable. It will not be predictable. It will be subject to loss and disappointment. So the Buddha is starting by acknowledging the fact that we're not happy all the time. And the second noble truth is, he says, the reason that we're not happy is because of our own desires. And we constantly want things to be this way or that way, or we want things to change. We want things to be different than they are. So when your body hurts, you want it to stop hurting. Or when there's rice on the table and you want there to be cake instead. So this is wanting, whether you're wanting something to go away or wanting something to come to you, whether you want more of something pleasant or less of something unpleasant, it's all wanting. And whenever you want something, whenever you have any kind of desire in the mind, then that means you're not content. And when you're not content, you're not happy. So if you're not content with this moment just as it is, then you'll never be happy. You might have moments of pleasure, but even those moments of pleasure will be tainted by the persistent discontent in the mind. So then that leads to the third noble truth. So the Buddha said that when we let go of desire, then we experience happiness. When we let go of desire, then what we're letting go of is also the corresponding suffering, the corresponding sadness and anguish and misery and confusion that came along with that desire. So desire and suffering are inseparable. If you want to let go of suffering, you need to let go of desire. And the moment you let go of desire, then you let go of suffering. And what you find in its place is happiness. What you find in its place is serenity and joyfulness of mind. And the Buddha then talks about the ways that we can practice in order to let go of our desires and to attain true happiness and understanding. And that's the trainings that I've been speaking about. So the trainings in morality, concentration, and wisdom. So this is a very broad overview of basically what Buddhism is about, basically what we're doing. And again, this is just a beginning. So if you're just getting started with the practices of the Buddha, then it's important to study more deeply, study the Four Noble Truths in depth, study the Noble Eightfold Path in depth. And this will give you a good understanding of the basic foundational principles of what Buddhism is. And if you want to start practicing with Buddhism, then it's important to firmly commit to following the 5 precepts, as I mentioned earlier. So not killing, not stealing, maintaining the trust boundaries in romantic relationships, not telling lies, and not using any intoxicants. So keeping those 5 precepts diligently and persistently. and also to practice meditation every day. So even just 10 minutes of mindfulness of the body, as we started this session with, 10 minutes a day for a few weeks, and you'll notice a dramatic improvement in your state of mind. You'll notice that the mind is much calmer, sharper, and happier. And study the Buddha's teachings in depth. So the more you learn, the more you'll understand. So listen to Dhamma talks by Buddhist monastics, read books by Buddhist monastics, and also start reading the Buddhist teachings. So a great place to start is the book called In the Buddha's Words. So it's an anthology of selections from the Buddhist scriptures, which give a good overview of the Buddha's teachings. So that will give you a good basis for understanding what the Buddha was talking about. And as time goes by and you practice more and more, then your understanding will deepen and your enthusiasm will deepen. And correspondingly, as you get more tangible benefits from practicing the Buddha's teachings, then your faith and confidence in the Buddha and the Dhamma will become stronger and stronger. And naturally, that will lead then to a stronger commitment to one's practice. And eventually, with sufficient diligence and usually several lifetimes of dedicated practice, you can attain the same awakening that the Buddha attained. But even long before you attain full awakening, even just along the course of practicing, you'll notice improvements in your life. So if you practice a little bit, then you'll notice a little bit of improvement. If you practice a lot, you'll notice a lot of improvement. And if you commit completely and wholeheartedly to following the Buddha's teachings, then you can completely transform your mind until all suffering is completely eradicated from the mind. All confusion is removed from the mind until the mind becomes completely purified, completely peaceful, completely joyful under all circumstances. So I think that's enough for a good brief introduction to Buddhism. So we can end with 3 sadhu. So sadhu is another traditional saying, which means like excellent or wonderful. Hallelujah. So we'll end with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And at this time, I'll take any questions that are provided. So I see a number of people joining in the chat window. So hello to Kumu, Maria, Kanpicha, Janaki, Julie, Hassan, Mary, Tina, Jayanta, Patricia, Shyamala, Sud, Si Yong. So welcome to all of you. And I see one question so far. So Janaki says, does samadhi really mean concentration? I understand it as more like a state of mental equilibrium, tranquility, stillness, unification of mind, or ekaggata. Please explain. Yeah, so this is one of the ongoing debates in current translation circles, which is whether concentration is really a good translation of the word samadhi, and if perhaps there's another word that would be a better translation. Again, I'd like to point back to the literal meaning of the word samadhi. So the literal meaning of samadhi means bringing together or holding together. So from the prefix sang, which means together, and the verb root di, which means to hold. So samadhi means holding together or bringing together. And the middle bit there, means like towards. So bringing the mind together. Yeah, so unification of mind, I think, is a great explanation for the word samadhi. Collectedness of mind is also quite good. So the aspects of equilibrium, tranquility, and stillness, those are aspects of samadhi, but they're not actually translations of the word samadhi. So the word concentration, it does have some drawbacks as a translation of the word samadhi, but it's not bad. It's not bad in my opinion. As long as one properly explains what we mean when we say samadhi, then there's no problem. And this is generally true with any technical term. One generally needs to explain it in some depth. Otherwise, there's bound to be misunderstandings. That's actually the only question I'm seeing online. Any questions from the monastery residents? No? I mean, none of you are beginners, so I didn't imagine you'd have much to ask about. So if there's nothing else from online, then we might actually end at that point. So a good short introductory session for anyone who needs a introduction to the basics or a refresher of the basic principles of Buddhism. So I will say one thing, which is that Buddhism is about training the mind, which is extremely difficult to train. So in the course of practicing Buddhism, often in the beginning, what starts to become clear to oneself is just how messy, chaotic, and untrained the mind is. So sometimes people become quite disheartened, especially when they first start practicing meditation and they realize just what a mess their own mind is. And then they get disheartened and maybe think of quitting. But actually, the fact that you're recognizing that your mind is messy means that you're already on the right track. Before you started practicing meditation, then maybe you thought your mind wasn't so bad. Well, when you start practicing meditation, you start to realize just how chaotic and uncontrolled your mind is. So that means you're developing wisdom. You're developing self-awareness. And based upon that wise self-awareness, then you can start to train the mind. You can start to teach the mind how to be stable and happy. But it takes time and it takes practice. So it's important to be very forgiving and gentle with yourself and give yourself the time to really properly develop a meditation practice. It doesn't happen quickly or easily. So you have a question?
I thought it might be nice if you could share some of the benefits of meditation for people to motivate them.
Yes.
In their practice.
Yeah, so the benefits of meditation, I mean, actually the most immediate noticeable benefit is that you'll be noticeably happier and calmer. And that's not just when you're meditating, but it extends throughout the rest of your day. And often this becomes quite clear to the other people in your life. The other people in your life, after a couple of weeks, they'll start to notice that something's different about you, that you're noticeably calmer and more cheerful than you used to be. And also, as you become more aware of your own mind, then you'll start to recognize what you're doing with your mind that's been making you unhappy all along. So you can start to change what you're doing with your mind. You can start to become the master of your own mind. And in so doing, once again, you can start to learn how to be happy all the time. So cultivating a clear presence in your life. So it's kind of like your life goes from being black and white to being in color, or goes from being two-dimensional to three-dimensional. You start to have a very sharp, deep, clear awareness of your experience, which is tempered then by this serenity and joyfulness of mind. And the more the practice continues, the more deeply you practice with morality and concentration and wisdom, then the deeper this goes, to the point where, again, it is possible to completely transform the mind, to where the mind becomes completely immune to any kind of state of discomfort or misery. So I think we'll go ahead and end at that point. So again, just a few introductory remarks to help those who are either getting started with a Buddhist practice or who want a refresher of the basics. So again, please continue practicing, and most importantly, pay attention to the benefits and results that come from your practice as you go along. So we'll end the session with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you next time.